Lauren Witzke has won the Republican nomination for Senate in Delaware. And if you're like me, you're probably asking yourself, well, who the hell is Lauren Witzke? Well, I had never heard of her before yesterday, but the more I looked into her, the more I realized she might just be the most interesting candidate in 2020. Maybe even including Donald Trump. So I actually recorded this video last night and just focusing on this QAnon aspect. But when I was looking for a good thumbnail to use for the image, I found more articles about her, and I realized there is a lot more to Lauren Witzke than just the fact that she has professed a support for QAnon, which I think she's walked back a little bit. But so I'm kind of re-recording this video and adding some extra elements to it because honestly, I think this woman is very, very interesting, and to see her running on the Republican ticket for Senate, we're seeing a new breed of politicians, especially in the Republican Party, where they're coming from, they're less establishment. They're more normal, regular people who have the same kind of trials and tribulations and the same America First mentalities, as opposed to the go to Washington and become part of the cesspool mentality that we've been seeing for years and years and years on both sides of the aisle. So we have this from the Daily Caller. Political newcomer who supported QAnon, Lauren Witzke, wins Delaware Senate primary. And so political newcomer Lauren Witzke won Delaware's Republican senatorial primary Tuesday, becoming the latest candidate with ties to the QAnon conspiracy to become an official GOP nominee for political office. And I do think that is interesting to see how, you know, we've seen a number of these. It's kind of been like a good handful of politicians that are running for office and winning who have supported QAnon. And you guys have all heard my take on QAnon if you follow this channel. But for those of you guys who are new, quick overview. You know, I think that QAnon, it's a patriot movement. So I'm never going to go out and outright dismiss QAnon. And I do think that they cover a lot of good information. It's raised a lot of awareness for human trafficking, child trafficking, things like that are all you have to do is look at news reports for arrests for child trafficking under the Trump administration and see how pervasive this problem really is. And it's really drawn a lot of attention to that. So you can't sit here and say that it's entirely baseless or that it does nothing good or anything like that. But I would be weary about accepting everything that the QAnon community, all the information that gets passed around the QAnon community. There is some of it that seems dubious at best. So, you know, approach it with, you know, if you approach it with the patriotic vigor, the spirit of QAnon, and take with a grain of salt, take with a little bit of skepticism some of the information that's passed around there. You know, it's kind of a do your own research type thing, which means you actually have to do your own research. If you sit there and let everybody do your research for you in it, they're going to come up with stuff that is, like I said, dubious at best, misguided. So you actually have to look into things yourself, and you'll find that there is a good bit of information, and there's also some bunk information. So I don't really go down that path of, is it all this or is it all that? No, it's not. It's neither. It's neither. It's neither a hits the nail on the head all the time, and it's also not a baseless conspiracy theory, because there is a lot of good information in there so long as you have the ability to discern for yourself and not just accept everything because it's under the umbrella of Q. So Witzke beat attorney James DiMartino, the GOP's preferred candidate, by almost 14 points, according to the New York Times, winning all three of the state's counties. Wow, Delaware is a tiny state. It's almost it's like Arkansas. It's one of those states that you kind of forget even exists. But of course, the GOP was going to prefer DiMartino because he sounds like he was probably more of an establishment candidate, and that's why, you know, I get excited when I see these these Q supporting people winning office over the establishment types, is because no matter what, we're done with the establishment. You know, Donald Trump has really doused cold water on the fire, the dumpster fire of the establishment that has been ruling Washington for years on both sides of the aisle. So I don't really care what the GOP's preferred candidate is. Screw the GOP, forget the GOP. You can, one thing that you can, I guess, let me see the best way to put this. There's a certain smell test that any QAnon supporting person passes, and that's that they're pro-America, pro-patriot movement, and they're going to be pro-Trump. They're going to be a Trump-style conservative. So I think that is a good thing, and I'll take one of those politicians over somebody who is just trying to go and be part of the Washington establishment any day of the week. So she is now set to face incumbent Democratic Senator Chris Coons in November. Witzke also faced criticism over alleged support for QAnon, a conspiracy theory that believes a deep state tied to pedophilia attempting to sabotage President Trump, after tweeting a photo of herself in one of its shirts and using one of its signature hashtags. So, they talk. They most of the time when you hear them talk about QAnon, they make it sound absolutely ridiculous. They say that it's a cabal of Satanist pedophile cannibals and trying to overthrow Trump. And, that does sound kooky when you don't give it any context and when you focus on the cannibal side, which I think is probably one of the most questionable elements of it. And I also don't think that it's not even a big factor in the whole QAnon idea. Most of what QAnon talks about is basically Donald Trump taking down the deep state. And we have seen through the very, very concerted efforts between the media, the establishment politicians, really anything that is all linked in that establishment umbrella. They all hate Donald Trump, and they do it in unison, and they parrot each other, and they cannot give him a single win on anything. So you have to wonder, what are they so vehemently defending against? So by the way that they all come together and so monolithically oppose every single thing Trump does, it actually gives credence to the whole QAnon idea that there is a deep state, an establishment that is working to overthrow Donald Trump. And we've seen that through the whole Russian collusion, through Ukraine, a lot of things that we see they're actually covering up for themselves. And, of course, that's what the left does. Their Saul Alinsky rules for radicals: always accuse your opponent of doing exactly what you're doing. So, with the whole Russian collusion thing, I seem to recall the whole Christopher Steele dossier, what that Hillary Clinton funded was getting information from Russians, which is exactly what they were accusing Donald Trump of doing. They were accusing Donald Trump of quid pro quo with Ukraine. But we have Joe Biden on video talking about how, if you don't fire that prosecutor who's looking into Burisma, which my son works for, then you're not getting that aid money, which, of course, they knew that aid money was just going to be stolen by the oligarchs because Ukraine is probably the most corrupt country on the planet. So they accuse everybody of doing exactly what they're doing. So this is Witzke wearing her We Are Q shirt, and let's just go ahead and get the elephant out of the elephant in the room out of the way here. She is obviously a very good looking woman. She is really almost cuter than two kittens wrestling over a ball of yarns. So let's just go ahead and get that off the bat. She is a good looking woman. Part of what makes her interesting as well. Now, I know I've kind of buried the lead and I've only talked about the Q stuff. I've got two articles here and I don't want to be jumping back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the QAnon portion before I get to the part where she was once a Mexican cartel drug smuggler. So this woman really is pretty interesting. So let's see. Despite the tweet, Witzke has tried to distance herself from the conspiracy, telling the Associated Press that it is nothing more than a mainstream psyops to get people to trust the plan and not do anything, referencing the slogan often used by QAnon supporters. I think that's funny that even the way that she's distancing it is almost even more conspiratorial. It's, the people who want QAnon to be real, but then they question it, whether it's a psyop in and of itself, a psyop within a psyop kind of thing. And, there is that concern because there is the whole trust the plan thing, that are we really just sitting back and letting the left take over like they're doing in the streets, and is it keeping us complacent? That is a legitimate concern. So, good on her to be smart and actually ask the questions that really do need to be asked about the whole QAnon thing. Maybe it really is not legitimate. That's also why I don't wave support for QAnon and that kind of thing. There are elements of it that I like. Obviously, the patriotism and the calling out certain things like pedophilia and the deep state corruption and all that kind of stuff. I think it's onto a lot of things in certain aspects. But I also don't know that we should just be sitting back and trusting that this is all going to be taken care of for us. She said, I certainly think it's more hype than substance. Though Witzke has attempted to distance herself from the conspiracy, a record number of GOP congressional nominees have been tied to it, including some who are favored to win their elections in November. Well, of course a record number of GOP congressional nominees have been tied to it, because the thing didn't really even exist. I mean, I guess it started in 2017, but the last time we had any congressional elections was 2018, and QAnon hasn't really become mainstream or picked up steam until the past year. So, of course, a record number of, I mean, that's kind of a given right there. So, Colorado congressional nominee Lauren Boebert said in May that she hoped the conspiracy was true because it only means that America is getting stronger or better, according to the Colorado Times reporter. While Georgia congressional nominee Marjorie Taylor Greene, who also supported QAnon and supported other false theories, I don't know what those theories are, is almost guaranteed to be elected in November since her opponent dropped out of the race. And that was a really, really long sentence. They could have put a period in there somewhere so I could address the beginning of that sentence, which was where Lauren Boebert was saying that she hoped the conspiracy was true. Now, that's kind of a two-sided coin, where you hope that some of the abuses that it reveals are not true, because you don't ever want to see children being abused the way, in ritualistic fashions, the way some of this QAnon stuff talks about. But if that is true, then you absolutely hope that it's true that Trump and his team there is a team of military intelligence officers with Trump that are working to weed this out of America and to take it all down. So that's kind of you hope it's true if the worst parts of it are true, but you kind of hope that stuff isn't true. But the more we see about, these human traffickers getting arrested, these child abusers getting arrested, the more we have to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the child abuse narrative of the QAnon movement does appear to be true. And that's verifiable with arrest records and news reports of those arrest records. But let's get to the other very interesting part about Lauren Witzke here. And so this is actually from earlier this year. So this is from WDEL, which I think is a local Delaware news agency. So local news source. So from Mexican cartel drug runner to U.S. Senate hopeful, Delaware's Lauren Witzke looks to upset incumbent Coons. And there she is standing by, a bell with Delaware there, and she is a very attractive woman. Keep it respectful. Keep it respectful, people. So, running on the America First platform, Witzke has officially was officially placed on the ballot opposite Coons on May 18th, 2020. And you got to love that she's running on an America First platform. That is a pro-Trump platform. Typically, always is, always will be. Two of her strongest platforms, she said, are intimately tied: immigration and battling the opioid epidemic in America. Witzke has no qualms discussing her own journey through addiction to opioids and substance recovery. She said it gave her an insight into the troubled underground activities involved in America's war on drugs. And I think this is great because it really highlights, we've been seeing this a lot in certain circles of the rap game. Artists like Struggle Jennings and Jelly Roll, and a lot of these rappers. A lot of them kind of in the Nashville scene as well, where they were people who formerly were tied to criminal elements and criminal enterprises, and they redeemed themselves. And so I think the redemption story, it's one that has resonated in American cinema for years, but when it comes to real life, we often write people off by their pasts, and I don't think that we should do that. I mean, I have a little bit of an outlaw past when I was younger too, and I've certainly left all that behind more than half my life ago, or I guess around half my life ago, where you can be young and dumb and make certain mistakes and get wrapped up in certain cultural elements, and then be able to see the error of your ways, gain redemption, gain salvation, and put your life back on track. And that actually gives you a greater insight into what other people are going through. Because if you never went through anything like that yourself, you can only imagine, which oftentimes your imagination is also going to be, you're going to have certain ideas baked into the cake about what that really is that may not really represent the reality of people's situations and the choices that they've made. So I think it is really interesting to have somebody with this background who is free to openly talk about it, that is running for office, and she really might be able to give more insight. So let's go ahead and listen to what she says about it. So she says, my addiction started in Wilmington, inner city of Wilmington. So I know it is an issue, especially there, she said. It's just destroying families, destroying young Americans, and it doesn't discriminate. It affects the poverty level all the way up to the politician. So yeah, I mean, we see, I mean, there's that old trope of the rich housewife from the 1950s who is just zonked on pills all the time. And at the time, that wasn't really considered a drug problem, but we're seeing more and more with the opioid crisis, especially. A lot of these pharmaceutical drugs can be very heavily abused and can be just as bad, if not worse, than a lot of illicit, totally illegal drugs. So while working for a pharmaceutical company in Wilmington, Witzke said she became depressed, started taking pain pills, and became addicted, which eventually grew into a full-blown heroin addiction. Now, I've had friends go down that path, too, where they got addicted to heroin, and some of them not doing so well. Others have been able to completely turn their lives around. So it is good to see that people will go down these paths and still have that hope for redemption. And I think having stories of success out here, like Witzke, where she can formerly have been a heroin addict and turn her life around to become a politician, to become somebody who is making change for the better in the world. It's an inspiring story for people who are struggling with these issues, that they can see that someone else did it. Well, why can't they? And so I think it's good that we have kind of these checkered backgrounds sometimes in people, that we don't always expect them to have been saints their entire lives. What's that quote? Every sinner has a future, every saint has a past. You know, and I think that's a very powerful quote, and I think it's a good one that I think we need to really embed more in our cultural understanding of how we treat people. So she says, it was just part of the industry. I bought into that lie that there was a drug to fix everything. Exactly. And that's how it happens with a lot of people, that you buy into a lie of a certain culture that you're just around it, that you're just inside of, and you don't question the premises. You just go with it, and it's very easy to do that. It's kind of a laissez-faire way to treat your mentality, which you need to regulate the way that you perceive information better. And you need to ask yourself the questions, is this really a good thing? Like, just because it's alluring doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's easy to accept it and you can easily go down that path, you're going to pay the price for it later. So before she was ever a program director for Teen Challenge, a safe space recovery ministry, she had to first battle her addictions and become a graduate of the program. She said, I ended up in a situation that I never thought I'd find myself in. I was running drugs actually for the Mexican cartels. So she was selling drugs. She was part of this whole thing. These people came here 100% legally. Chain migration brought people here who will sell drugs to Americans and not think twice if it kills them. They will sell the drugs to American children. They will sell them to your families. They don't care. And so I think it's good. I think it's really impressive that she's able to tie in how illegal immigration and these cartels operate by taking advantage of our immigration system and how we allow things like chain migration. You know, you got the the kid who's been living here legally, grown up here in America, but he's got that cousin over the border who's involved with the cartels, who is, you know, able to come over here through chain migration, and they're just here being opportunists. The kid might be fine, but the cousin who gets to come over here because of chain migration, he's just a cartel opportunist. Doesn't care who. He has no allegiance to America. He has no loyalty to American people. He's just here to make money. And that's how they do it. So the answer to that issue is an immigration moratorium, Witzke said. A kind of one-in, one-out policy that will more closely control the number of United States residents gaining citizenship from outside countries. And it goes on to talk about how, you know, her ideas about family, which I think are important to highlight because I think they're really good. America's families need help, Witzke said. They're falling apart at rapid rates, largely in part, she thinks, to opioid addiction. Now, I wouldn't. She might be overstating the opioid addiction in the falling apart of the American family. It's much deeper than that. Like that might play a role in it. but it's not widespread enough where you can actually pin the falling apart of the American nuclear family on opioid addiction. I think a lot of that is the ideological insurgency of Marxist and cultural Marxist ideologies where they don't respect the family. It takes a village to raise a child, and not, they don't believe in the family unit because families are strong and sturdy. And they don't want people who are strong and sturdy because they want people who need to depend on the authoritarian government for these Marxist, socialist, communist ideas to take root and to thrive. So Witzke says, right now, we are a global leader in single parenthood, she said. I don't think it's any coincidence that we're also a global leader in opioid abuse. The breakdown of the American nuclear family, it's something that people don't like to talk about. However, when the family is the smallest form of government, we need to repair it in order for communities to thrive. I like that wording. Family is the smallest form of government. And that's exactly why the left tries to break it down. Because they don't want that small, independent form of government, that household government that they have no control over. So the breakdown of communities has been destructive across the board in many aspects. So in 1965, they implemented policies that literally pushed dads out of the homes. I talk about this all the time. It's the Great Society, which was a communist name for a social program, if I've ever heard one. Mothers will lose their benefits if they choose to get married. They don't have access to health care, so people are remaining single. I'd like to divert that money in order to get the dad back in the home. I'd like to incentivize marriage and family. I'd like to make it easier for people to have families, to buy a home, and have children. That's what it's all about. That's what America is all about. It's all about the family. So I'd like to implement pro-life, pro-family policies that encourage the nuclear family to stay together. I love it. I love it. And I think this Lauren Witzke, I am rooting for her 100% of the way. I think she is, and not only just because she's interesting and fascinating, but she has made her mistakes to evolve a very mature understanding of why those mistakes were mistakes and what we need to do to fix them. So yeah, that's it. That's kind of it for this story, which really brings it kind of me to the end of this video. And so I hope it didn't get too long here. But this is Lauren Witzke. I think she is. I'm rooting for her all the way. I hope she wins. I hope she beats Chris Coons. And who knows with Delaware? It is a blue state, but I've always kind of thought of it as more of a blue dog state, kind of a blue collar blue state. And so we might be seeing some switches to Trump in those states. So, good on Lauren Witzke. I really hope she wins. I'd love to see her in the Senate. That would be absolutely fascinating, and to see what she brings to the table. So anyways, guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button, share this video, let people know what kind of interesting people we have on the right running for office. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Parler @RamThorburn. Post lots of memes and a lot of fun content. And also, there are links to my Subscribestar, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below if you're interested in helping to support this channel. I could use a new webcam, so any help is greatly, greatly appreciated. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.